Hey, what's going on, y'all? My name is Luke, and I'm here to cover a topic called recursion. I was actually helping a student in the Catalyst program with one of our labs, and they had no idea that they could call a function within itself, which again is recursion. I thought it was a really cool little demo that we can maybe make a small YouTube video for, so here I am getting ready to code it out. So let's go ahead and jump on in. My JavaScript is attached to an HTML page right here in VS Code. There's nothing super magical going on here. This is the default HTML page generated by IntelliSense. I attach my app.js script into it, and I have a basic little console log that says hello world. So checking it out right here in our console log, we have hello world, so we know we have our HTML page linked up with our JavaScript perfectly. So recursion. There's a difference between iterating through something using a loop and using recursion, where something is calling itself within itself and continuing on and so on and so forth. There's not really a difference between a good or bad idea to use either solution, whether it's iterating or recursion. It's just another tool set in your problem solving kit, right? So that's why I described it to a lot of my students. So let's go ahead and build us a little function here. We're going to be using arrow function syntax. We're going to call it countdown, and it's going to have to take some kind of number as its argument. Now, inside of the function itself, it's going to do a check saying if the number we pass it is greater than 0, then we want it to console log the number. Otherwise, it's going to do something like console log done, or like, the countdown is done, right? Like that. Cool. So you're thinking, well, we can probably put in a loop in here with some kind of local scope variable that can help us loop through this to make sure we're checking what num happens and whatnot. But what we can do instead is kind of mind-boggling and kind of blew away my students when they realized they could do this. We could actually pass countdown into itself and pass whatever the value of num is. In this case, we're going to want it to be num minus 1. So whatever num is, we're going to subtract 1 and recall countdown, which will rerun this check and reconsole log num and keep going on until it's equal to 0, which will get console log done. So to actually demo this little guy here, let us try to call it with the value 5 as num, and we're going to see what happens. We're going to refresh our page here, and boom, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, done. Well, that's pretty cool. It worked. Right? It did exactly what we thought it was going to do. It was going to start with 5. 5 is greater than 0. It's going to console log 5. Then it's going to recall itself with 5 minus 1, which is 4, and it's going to repeat itself. So this is almost like using a for loop, right? That's pretty cool. So what if we wanted to slow this down a little bit to check out how it's working? Well, I'm going to wrap everything inside of here in a set timeout function. And we're going to have the function, and it's going to run for 1,000 milliseconds. So if you're not familiar with this, set timeout will run a function after a set amount of time has passed. In this case, I'm doing this anonymous function inside of here, and it's going to run for 1,000 milliseconds, which is just 1 second. So I'm going to cut this bottom code here, paste it in the middle here. I'm going to give myself a little bit of room to think. There we go. So now we've essentially just moved it into a timeout. So instead of it console logging everything right away, now after we save our code and check it out, it'll actually do a cool little countdown for us with a function calling itself within itself. Functions in functions in functions, right? Functions all the way down. I thought that was a really cool concept, and something that in my time at Covalence when I was a student, I don't think we actually covered this. So when a student asked me for help, I actually had to do some of my own research in order to help them answer this question. So something else we can actually tack onto this that I thought was really cool is not only can we pass a function into itself, I can pass another function in as an argument to a function that we can later call back. So I'm going to add a new argument to my countdown function, and we're going to call it callback. And again, as long as we're consistent, it doesn't really matter what we call it. So I'm going to pass in something called callback. And I'm going to also have to pass it down here, right? Because right here in countdown, when I'm recalling itself, I'm going to have to continue to pass down that callback into itself. And then when it gets to 0, I no longer want to just console log done. We're going to move that out into a function. So I'm going to say, let's go ahead and invoke callback once num is equal to 0. So we have to actually define what callback is going to be, and we're going to say const is done. is going to be a function with no arguments. And all it's going to do for us is do what we did before, which is console log done. And we're going to make it a bit more fun and have it say, this is done yin rings. All right, not just done, it's done yin rings. So now that we've defined this function is done, we're going to pass it in as the callback is done. And you'll notice that we're only passing in is done and not doing is done parentheses. When you pass the parentheses like that, it invokes it immediately. So what would happen is instead of going 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 done yin rings, it'll actually say done yin rings immediately and then start counting down. So let's check that out. So see, it returned the function ASAP, and it is not behaving the way we expect. And we're not passing in a callback. What we've done instead is returned a value that logged right away. And this callback that's searching for it to invoke down here, we didn't pass a definition of anything. And to do that, you actually remove those little invoking parentheses. And so now what's going to happen is it should count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, then console log done yin rings. So here we're passing in the definition of what is done is supposed to do and actually invoke it down here when it is time, aka when num is equal to 0. And yeah, we keep passing it down via this callback, which loops back up here and puts it into this callback and keeps going on downwards. So now let's try it again and let's see what happens. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, done yin rings. Yeah, so that was a quick little demo on recursion and writing your own callback functions that I thought would be a cool lesson for this video. So y'all stay tuned for more things coming from me in the future because I have a lot of cool ideas I like to demo to you guys. So peace.